on to standard 2. So here's the deal. If you found this first piece challenging, now there's a difference here. Molly's looking at me. So there's a difference here. If you found it challenging because you just like a lot of time to work on your stage 1, I'm not talking to you. But if you found it challenging because you really found it challenging, then there's a whole lot of people in here that can help you out, and you should invite them to, sit down with you individually. We need to make sure that you feel comfortable with doing this. Otherwise, if you can't do it yourself, it's really hard to evaluate teachers on it. And then I worry about quality control. So if you really felt like choosing and enduring understanding, making sure that you're pushing yourself up the global ladder, writing your essential questions, meeting the test of 10, meeting the test of 7, and then writing your outcomes. If you felt like that was very challenging, we've been working on it for several months, and that's okay. We just want to make sure you get the support you need, and you don't just go through the motions of being here, because it's going to be a big problem when it comes down to actually evaluating and helping teachers do it. So if that was a challenge for you, there were lots of people walking around. Tiffany, Jamie, Holly, all the DOS. I don't want to miss anybody. Dana, any of those people can help. So please be proactive for yourself and get with those people. Now what's happening over there now is we're going to actually evaluate your stage 1s by table, which is a safer place than individually, right? We're going to evaluate those using a Google form. We'll send that back to you. You're going to have it. Okay? Now we're going to move on and review what's going on here today. So enduring understanding, perspective influences outcome. We're trying to improve perspective on sight and on backward planning and how they converge on our tool. Here are the essential questions for today. What are quality, formative, interim, and summative assessments? What are the requirements for an assessment to be considered performance and therefore part of a teacher's body of evidence? This is an important question to your teachers. They want to know. And remember, this year we're not using Standard 6 for real, but we're hoping teachers are out there writing their Standard 6, their balanced assessment system right now, because next year it has to be for real by law. We didn't choose the timeline. It is what it is. We're making lemonade. And Standard 6 is part of the assessment, the evaluation next year for real. It's got to be 50%. You know all that story. And so we're hoping that teachers are taking this year to actually figure out what their balanced assessment is going to look like. We have teachers in the pilot, almost 100 of them, which is perfect, and they're doing their balanced assessment, and they're building it right now, and Sina's giving them feedback, and that's been really constructive and powerful. And hopefully, if you have one of those teachers in your building, they're going to be a huge asset to the rest of your staff as they move forward into trying to build their balanced assessment system. And you also have your BAS advocates and your GVC folks and your change agents and your task force. We got people doing all kinds of things, and that's great. But that's a key question that teachers are asking me is, what does an assessment have to look like to be part of my Standard 6? And I think that this is going to be key today. What are the requirements for an assessment to be considered authentic and world-class? So number 3 is all about assessments being strong enough that a teacher would be eligible for a bonus. So you're going to see a scaffolding here today. You're going to see a scaffolding of, and Sina's going to be, she's back there, she's not saying a word, but she's going to. You're going to see a scaffolding that Sina and her department have really built. It's really well done. Of course, it's a work in progress, as everything is, but you're going to see a scaffolding of quality, then performance quality, and then authentic performance quality. And you're going to see that today. And then I think it will be much easier for you to talk with your teachers about this. And Sina is she constantly reminds me that we're moving here from current state to where we want to go, but there are many steps on that journey, and we have to just really pay attention to that and not try to jump too far. And then how do leaders coach teachers from assessment to performance assessment to authentic assessment? So that's the 4th question of the day. Here are the outcomes. Evaluators will construct world-class formative, interim, and summative assessments. So you're going to do that in a minute. Accurately evaluate a unit. We got some units for you today. They're real units. We've strengthened, we're just being honest here, we've strengthened stage 1 on those, so you're not spending as much time on that. But we've left stage 2. Evaluators will model quality feedback to teachers regarding Site 2.0 standards 1 and 2. This is my assessment, my stage 2. I put it up there so you could see it. I usually build it into stage 3 because it's mostly for me. And then this is the summative piece that we've shown you before. I know you can't read it. It's not intended for you to read. But it's the one we've used multiple times about what we're trying to do. So these are my strategies for today. We did the create stage 1. You see that's just the first bullet. That's why we're trying to keep moving. So assuming you have world-class outcomes in stage 1, right? Because you should never move on to stage 2 until you have stage 1 done. But we've spent a considerable amount of time on stage 1, so I think we're ready. Given some of the formative data we have, the interim data we have, your evaluators feel like we're ready. So we're moving on to stage 2, also standard 2 of sight. So there are these elements of standard 2. Teachers use formative, teachers use interim, summative. They give students feedback, and they assess the 4 Cs. So this is the high-level overview of what sight standard 2 is about. I hope you've seen this before. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. These are available. Sina actually updated this with her team because she did a transition version that we're going to get to you that actually, over here on the right, you see daily assignments, checks for understandings, quizzes, and questioning. She considered that, and I don't want to speak for you, Sina, so you should come up here and help me, but she considers that current state. That's current state, and then she now has a new version of this where the things on the far right are our transitional state or our first step forward. So you're going to see this kind of moving, and I want to give Sina a chance to talk about that a little bit. And then she uses this also, and we've talked about that. And then here we go, basic quality checks for assessment. These are not the quality of checks for standard 6. These are just, when you first get a unit, here's where I would start. First of all, do the assessments work toward sustainable learning, or do they ask kids to know stuff? Right? Because you can have strategies that say create, but if your assessments are all about no, it's no. And if I ask you to build, or here's my fact, create a model of the human body and label the bones. Where is that on Bloom's? It's no. It's the bottom. Okay? We're getting some of this. You're going to see some of this. Create a model of the body. It's not create. It's know. Because all I have to do is know the bones. I don't even really have to know them. I have to look them up on the internet. So the first thing you need to look at is when you get a stage 2 is where is it on Bloom's? The second thing is it aligned to stage 1? And that seems so simple. My guess is you're going to stop there and you're going to give feedback, and then people are going to bring stuff back. So those are the first 2 things. Sustainable learning and alignment. Now, if you have that, and here are the 4 Cs rubrics, I just put those in again. If people choose to teach creativity, the rubric's done for them. They just have to put it into stage 2. That's probably one of the easiest ones. Okay, so here's what, Sina, do you want to go through some of the quality checks before we go into this next piece? Okay, so I'm going to skip over this. Oops, I missed it. Okay, so Sina has developed quality checks for assessment. She's going to briefly go over this because we're not going to stand here and lecture you on the quality assessment item pieces, and then you're actually going to use it and build your own stage 2 for your own stage 1 that you just built and see if you can do it. And we'll be here to walk around and help you and understand some of the terminology.
All right, so when Liz referred to the evolution of the scaffolding process for capacity building, we really looked at first, and when I shared the quality resource guide with Cabinet, and there were 2 concentric circles, the performance assessment circle and the authentic assessment circle. And they said, you need to back up. And so that's how we ended up with 3 concentric circles, which is exactly right. So when we look at the layered model, we want to look, and I'm a metaphor person, so I have a metaphor. If you don't like metaphors, you can just ignore that. But basically, the idea is that all assessments need to be quality, because in my business, we call it dirty data. If you have a assessment that doesn't have quality, then you end up with dirty data, and we make decisions around dirty data, and then we have dirty decisions. So then we can go down that rabbit hole. So when we talk about standard 2 in sight, we're talking about assessment. the big circle. There are teachers whose big circle will primarily be assessment, and they might have a little bit of performance assessment and maybe a little bit of authentic assessment. And then there will be teachers that all they do is performance assessment and authentic assessment. We know that. It's just like we all have degrees of expertise. Teachers have degrees of expertise. Students have degrees of expertise. So we tried to build a quality resource guide to support that scaffolding process. So when we talk about standard 2, the first analysis is the bones. So are the assessments quality assessments? And the reason why this is not a rubric, it's rather a list of standards, is because they're basically, they are or they're not. They're either aligned or they're not. Now you could have degrees of alignment, and that's more of a discussion. And so in a conversation with Jerry said, I need to be able to ask the questions. Thank you, Jerry, for that input. And so that's how we ended up with the attachment that shows how a teacher could actually look at an assessment and ask the questions and do a self-analysis. Or you could take that and ask the questions around, because there's lots of standards of excellence, but there's really a handful of questions about quality. So the intent is not that you are evaluating standard 2 with the authentic assessment rubric. That's not where all your teachers are. But you may have a teacher who is. And so that would be the appropriate lens to evaluate their assessments. The bones are for all assessments, including performance and authentic. When we go to performance assessments, this is the doing. So all assessments are about knowing. Students need to know something before they can do something, right? So all assessments are about knowing, and I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm just giving you the context. The performance assessments are about the doing, which is why I have the metaphor of muscles. So it's the running and the jumping and so the rubric about performance assessment is about the doing. And what does research say about the quality of assessments for doing stuff? The last rubric is about to actually be authentically engaged in whatever the student is demonstrating their learning. So authentic assessment is they are not just simulating, they're actually in it. And my favorite example is the environmental club at Ponderosa. That group lives authentic assessment. They are learning, and then they're going out and they're doing community projects, they're doing their own projects. That's amazing authentic assessment. So it's not some ethereal thing out there that we all aspire to. It's real life implementation of what we're learning. So that's authentic assessment. And one of the questions I get is, why is highly effective performance assessment the same as effective authentic assessment? Well, because it's a learning progression. And so Dan, his input was, well, I want to see it as a learning progression, Sina. So that is why we have attachment, whatever, B or C or whatever it is. So you can use those tools either specifically to performance assessment, or you can see the whole big picture. So that's the description of the quality assessment criteria. Are every assessment going to be quality assessment? No. But we are moving toward that goal of having all of our assessment be quality assessment. Do we have control over all the assessment? Would we rate TCAP as quality assessment? Well, we can rate it as quality assessment if we look at the guidelines of quality in the way that we use it. If we're using it appropriately to what it's intended, then yeah, the results could be embedded in that quality feedback and performance part. So are there any questions about, because I've had teachers say, there's no way I'm going to be highly effective on standard 2 if I have to be rated on that rubric. Well, standard 2 is about the bones. We're talking just about the qualities of the standards of excellence of just all assessment. And that's where we start. And if you have a teacher who's a master at performance assessment, then that would be the lens they're looking at themselves through. So I want to make sure that I'm not sending an erroneous message that somehow standard 2 is the whole package. It's an evolution of learning. So any big level questions about that? Because I just don't want to be sending the wrong message. Where do you want to go back to? Oh, forward? Okay. Oh, just the pieces, yeah.
Okay, so on your table there is a colorful rubric. It's like yellow, green, blue. I'm not going to read all this to you because I know you can read. So there's a colorful rubric on your table. It has these quality criteria that Sina's been talking about. I'm not going to go, you'll see there's a lot of slides here because I created these slides. We have these slides so that if you have questions, we can come back and we can go to the slide that pertains so everybody can see it. But we're not going to go through and read through all these slides. But the point of this is to show you that these rubrics exist and are available to you. So here's the goal. The goal is that whatever you put in standard 2, stage 2, is quality. We want quality assessments for our students. Teachers who aspire to a higher level than that, somebody who already has all quality assessments, you want to encourage them to go to the next level of performance, quality and performance assessments. And then the third level is authentic performance. And that's why we have these nested circles. So you have quality assessment on the outside. Hopefully everything we give our students is a quality assessment. Next you have some of those are probably performance assessments. And then some of those are actually authentic performance. Authentic means that it's done in a real world context. So the rigor is higher for the smallest circle. So your most talented teachers will be hopefully aspiring to authentic assessment. And most teachers, I would say, are probably going to be just working toward quality at this point. That's probably where they are. So we have these all broken down. And again, not going to read them to you, but they are posted on Edmodo. So you have all these rubrics. We have printed out this basic quality assessment resource guide rubric. And I think the only way that you can actually learn about this is to use it, to use the rubrics yourself. So we're going to do that twofold. We're going to start by having you create quality assessment for your own stage 1 that's over there on the wall, the one that you wrote yourself. It's over there on the wall. That's your standard 1, stage 1. Let's go to stage 2. Let's write quality assessment for your outcomes that you did. Does that make sense? And you also are going to need to do that for the one you did personally and alone, because we're going to have you turn that in. It doesn't have to be today, but we are going to have you turn that in where you have a stage 1 you've written, you have a stage 2 you've written, you know that that the one that you have on your table is the quality guide is going to be the rubric that we're going to use to sort of evaluate it. Just like, then what we're going to do is we're going to actually give you some teacher units and then let you use these to evaluate the stage 2 of those. So use it to create your own, and then we're going to use it to evaluate. I think it's actually easier to create your own than it is to evaluate someone else's, and so that's why we're doing it in this order. Because you can sort of look at the rubric and see what's required and then write one. It's totally different than somebody handing you an assessment and saying, tell me how I did. So let's start by creating one. We're going to be walking around helping people do this. What you're going to do is when you get your stage 2 done, you get your assessments written, you're going to post them again, Edmodo and on paper, as a table. Okay? So again, I don't want to confuse you, but there's 2 pieces to this. We value the collaborative work you're doing as tables, and we want to do that, but we don't want anybody to sort of not get the opportunity to try it themselves, because it's a lot harder to actually do this than it is to talk about it. So we want to make sure everybody has both opportunities, and we're committed to doing the evaluation piece of that. So here again, the instructions. You're going to write your stage 2 for the outcomes that you just wrote a little bit ago. If you picked grilled cheese sandwich, now you're going to write the assessments for grilled cheese sandwich. Then, as a table, and I don't care which order you do it in, you could do the table one first. And that might be better, because that way everybody has a sort of common understanding, and then you work on your own. Then as a table, you're going to look at the one that you picked over there on the wall. That's your stage 1. Write the assessments that you're going to use to measure that. And make sure that you're writing quality assessment choices. Okay? If you have questions, raise your hand. I don't want to be too redundant to the whole group, but I also want to make sure you have what you need here. I don't think I have the whole rubric up here. Anyway, I'll put up the assignment, but I don't have the whole rubric up here in a way that you can actually read. So it's not going to be a lot of help. That's why we printed it off. So go ahead and please let us know if you need help.